Private Senators Bills. Order of the day number 74, COVID-19 Response Commission of Inquiry Bill 2024, resumption of second reading debate.
Senator Babet.
Thank you, Deputy President. Thank you. Now, I rise here today to speak on the COVID-19 Response Commission of Inquiry Bill 2024, a bill that I proudly co-sponsored with Senators Canavan, Antic, O'Sullivan, Rennick and Roberts. Now, this bill would not have been necessary if this Labor government had just done the right thing. This Labor Party, this Albanese government, should have initiated a full royal commission to investigate the response of federal and state governments to the COVID-19 pandemic. I and many other Australians, Deputy President, expected no less than this, but instead the Australian people got a narrow-scoped, watered-down, wish.com COVID-19 inquiry which barely touches the big issues. It's August 2024, well after our health bureaucrats got together and decided it was time to call off the so-called pandemic. But we are still none the wiser about what really went on during those COVID years. The entire country was shut down. We still can't really explain why. Nothing that was done made any sense. We threw out the pandemic handbook and we made decisions that were frankly crazy. The government spent hundreds of billions of dollars and the RBA did everything it could to flood the country with cheap cash. The banks loved it, obviously, but the Australian people continue to pay the price of high inflation and unaffordable housing to this day with no real accountability and no real answers. People's civil liberties were restricted in a way that would have made a communist dictator blush, and yet I still, for the life of me, cannot pinpoint the exact reasons why. We have real-world evidence from countries like Sweden, from states like Florida, where the worst of the draconian restrictions were not implemented, like what we had in my home state of Victoria anyway, or they were quickly rolled back. They didn't have rings of steel, they didn't have full-on curfews, and their police officers definitely didn't shoot people in the back with rubber bullets. And they arguably fared better than what we did. And yet our government's response has been to shrug, sweep it under the carpet and just insist nothing to see here. I am still waiting to find out why I was made to stand 1.5 metres from someone else. On whose advice was that? On what scientific basis was that decision made? On what scientific basis could I go to a restaurant and sit down and have dinner but not stand up? On whose advice and on what scientific basis is it that 1 hour of exercise outside was okay but not 1.5 hours? On whose advice and on what scientific basis was I forced to keep within 5 kilometres from my house but not 6 kilometres? How did any of this keep me safe from a virus with a near 100% survival rate for most healthy people? In New South Wales, people were told it's not safe to talk to your neighbour. Can you believe that garbage? Not safe to talk to your neighbour. In South Australia, people were locked down without the right to exercise or even walk their dog. Lockdowns. Whose idea was it to lock us down, and on what scientific basis? Like a prisoner in maximum security. Playgrounds were closed. Sport was banned. Why were children kept from going to school when they had an almost 0% chance of dying from COVID and bounced right back? Most of the kids who caught COVID recovered very quickly or just showed no symptoms at all. Who made that decision? What data was used to inform that decision? How was it that Victorian bureaucrats decided that it was too dangerous to play golf, or that a curfew was even the most effective way to fight COVID? Which health expert came up with the idea that I could have one friend come to my house and visit me, but not 4? Could go on and on and on and on, listing all the outrageous impositions that destroyed businesses and families and kept people from being by the bedside of their dying loved ones. And the maddening thing is that we are still, for the most part, completely clueless as to who decided what and exactly how those decisions were made during that time. As for the cost of those decisions, we can only guess, but it is in the hundreds and hundreds of billions. The Albanese government won the last election promising Australians answers. The Prime Minister stood up and he told Australians, if you put me in a lodge, I'll hold a royal commission or some other form of similar inquiry. Like I said before, I just didn't imagine that it would be Wish.com or Temu version of an inquiry. Australians trusted Mr Albanese just as we trusted our state premiers and their health officers during the pandemic. Well, I didn't trust them, actually. I didn't trust them because I could see through their lies. But sadly, most Australians did put their trust in these people, and they have been made to look like fools. The Prime Minister has announced, in my opinion, a sham inquiry that would address everything except the things Australians were demanding to know. Where were state premiers getting their advice from? Where? Were decisions to lock down based on science or perhaps on polling? Were restrictions on people's movements based on data or focus groups? Were the public being protected or were we being played? What is it in the vaccine contracts? Where did all the money go? Where did COVID come from? Was COVID a bioweapon? Was it a mistake? Was it bat soup? Was it released on purpose? Was it an accident? The Prime Minister promised responsibility, accountability and transparency. But no sooner had he unpacked his bags than he gave us a weak inquiry that will provide neither responsibility nor accountability nor transparency. Australians just want the truth. When will we get it? Australians want some accountability. So many lives were destroyed by the pandemic response. Will anyone admit fault? Will anyone put their hand up and just say they got it wrong? To simply move on as if nothing ever happens would be an outrage greater than the multiple outrages perpetrated during the pandemic itself. This Commission of Inquiry bill will finally give us the best chance to forensically examine how government and public institutions handled the COVID era. To deny Australians that opportunity would represent an epic failure of curiosity, a dereliction of public duty, and would heap insult upon injury to the millions of Australians whose lives were devastated not by the virus, but by the government's response to the virus. University of New South Wales Professor of Economics Gigi Foster analysed the economic, health and social impact of government-imposed COVID lockdowns and estimated that the cost was 68 times greater than any benefit provided. If she's even half right, just half right, we need to investigate that. A panel chaired by former top bureaucrat Peter Shergold found that the government response to COVID smacked of overreach that lacked compassion, consistency and clarity, and that actually worsened inequalities. If this is even partly true, decency, let alone duty, demands a full and frank inquiry. Now, I could stand here all day and give you examples of how state and federal governments, first driven by fear and then drunk on power, hurt and harm citizens with their manic COVID response. All of this demands a full investigation, and that's to say nothing of vaccine mandates, which threaten free men and women with punitive measures, effectively turning them into second-class citizens, destroying their livelihoods, breaking up their families if they declined a drug that has since proven to be, shall I say, less safe and less than effective than what was promised. Worse, there's now overwhelming evidence of vaccine injuries and deaths. Are we not the least bit curious? Do we not care even a bit? Are we really going to tell Australians that we're just disinterested? If there is any truth at all to these reports, should we not investigate to ensure that lessons are learned and mistakes are never again repeated? A once-in-a-100-year pandemic demands a once-in-a-lifetime commission of inquiry, and that is why the COVID-19 Response Commission of Inquiry Bill 2024 is not something which we should merely consider. It is something that we should approve, and with haste. Now, to the Liberal Party, you're in power for most of the pandemic. If you have nothing to hide, just support this bill. To Labor, You were not even in power for most of the pandemic, and your Prime Minister didn't wear 5 ministry hats at that time. Crossbenchers, you've got nothing to lose by pushing for transparency and accountability. My Senate colleagues, support this bill. It is the least that we can do for those that we represent. Thank you.
Senator Roberts.
Thank you. One Nation strongly supports the COVID-19 Response Commission of Inquiry Bill 2024 that I've co-sponsored, proudly co-sponsored. The increasing interest from mainstream media in reporting the harm our COVID measures have caused indicates time is running out for those engaging in a cover-up. The public remains deeply dissatisfied and concerned, gravely concerned about government's COVID response, state and federal. To listen to their responses in Senate estimates hearings over the last 4 years, it's clear they do not want to admit to a single mistake. Their answers suggest they consider their performance as being exemplary, worthy of medals and parades. The inventor of the Moderna vaccine was given a standing ovation at Wimbledon. Pfizer's chairman and CEO, Dr. Bourla, a veterinarian, not a doctor, declined government funding in order to prevent the government's ability to oversee the vaccine development, testing and manufacture. The study timeline was repeatedly pushed out to avoid revealing the results of the clinical trials until after billions of doses had been given.
The Prime Minister announced the independent inquiry. We'll get to you in a minute. We'll get to you in a minute. There is a wellspring, a sort of fetid wellspring of COVID conspiracy theorists. Some of them inhabit the benches over there. We know that Senator Babbitt comes from the outer reaches of some of the more kooky conspiracy theorist views. We know that. And there is, of course, always has been, a group of people in the community who, mobilised by concerns about chemtrails or lizard people or fluoride conspiracies, which some of these characters are also attracted to. They're on the Pizzagate material. They're on all of these things, on the drip for every internet conspiracy theory, the JFK stuff, the Roswell stuff. You're all into all that stuff. Senator Rennick thinks that the CSIRO is part of some global conspiracy. You sook.
Senator Canavan.
Point of order on relevance and also on reflecting on senators. This bill is about establishing a royal commission, commission of inquiry into COVID-19. I'd ask the senator to come back to the topic of the bill and also just keep in mind reflecting on other senators. I think we're getting into some pretty ridiculous statements about other people in this chamber.
Thank you, Senator Canavan. Senator Ayres, I've only just come into the chair. I will listen carefully to your contribution.
The history is that always there's an element of anti-Semitism that's not too far away. Always been the truth.
Senator Rennick.
Point of order, Chair. I ask that be retracted. That's outrageous slur.
That was not a reflection.
Excuse me, Senator Ayres. Please resume your seat. I don't believe that the senator was directly speaking about an individual senator in the chamber.
We know that Senator Babbitt comes from the outer reaches of some of the more kooky conspiracy theorist views. Senator Rennick thinks that the CSIRO is part of some global conspiracy. These are the kind of ideas that mobilised the recent terrorist incident in Wieambilla.
Senator Henderson.
Acting Deputy President, on the point of order, the senator has just drawn a very serious and disgusting imputation in relation to the most heinous crime in Queensland.
Senator Henderson,
I would ask him
that's not a point of order. It's not a point of order. He was not impugning a senator. It's not a point of order. I didn't hear anything then that was impugning anyone in this place, but I will refer it to the President and they can make an alternative ruling if they think that's what they should do. Senator Ayres.
The truth is that this motion emerges from that same swamp.
Senator Rennick, please resume your seat, Senator.
Imputation, his name's there, and by doing that, he has just imputed everything he said prior to that, and that is completely outrageous, and I call on this man to be censured. He is a disgrace to the Senate.
Senator Henderson.
On the point of order, Acting Deputy President, we are continuing to hear the most outrageous imputations from this senator. If he cannot comply with the rules of the Senate and the standing orders, I would ask him to sit down, but could you please rule again that he cannot make imputations against any senator. This is just absolutely disgraceful what he is doing.
The 15 minutes of diatribe and vitriol from Senator Ayres there was one of the most disgusting speeches I've ever heard. Actually, it is probably the most disgusting speech I've ever heard in this chamber. And all we're recommending here today and supporting is that we have a thorough inquiry to look at how the consequences of that pandemic can be dealt with, in particular, of course, the people who have been injured by the vaccine. When we have tried to move a bill that the Labor Party themselves supported, it was a recommendation by the Labor Party themselves when they were in opposition. They would rather, hide in the shadows, hide behind thugs like Senator Ayres, and we just spent.
Senator Rennick, can you resume your seat? That was a personal reflection. I'm going to ask you to withdraw. Senator O'Sullivan.
Thank you very much, Acting Deputy President. I rise and firstly want to thank Senator Canavan for putting this bill together and Senator Ralph Babet for bringing it before the Senate today. It's for those people that, throughout the pandemic, contacted me, particularly in Western Australia, like those people that couldn't make a funeral, those people that couldn't go and see a loved one in a hospital. Now, there were people that didn't want to be vaccinated, and that is their right, I believe, particularly when there was no evidence anywhere to say that the vaccine was going to reduce transmission. We owe it to the next generation to support this. We owe it to the next generation to ensure that we have a proper inquiry with public hearings, a commission of inquiry that is essential to get to the bottom of what was happening at that time.
Senator Hanson.
I move that the question be put.
So the question is that the question be put. Those of that opinion say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. So the question now is that the bill be read a second time. Those of that opinion say aye. Those of that opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. And division required? Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes.
I'll lock the doors. So the question is that the second reading on the private senator's bill be agreed to. The ayes shall move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. Senator Canavan, I point you teller for the ayes, and I understood you were leading on the bill, Senator. Yeah, and Senator Grogan for the noes. 26 noes, the matter is resolved in the negative.